The first few weeks of April 1999 were a busy time for police in Adelaide. One of the biggest events on the car racing calendar was on, and thousands of people from around Australia flocked to the capital. As crowds began to dwindle, two police officers hoped their shift would be a little more routine. But it wasn't to be.
The patrol officers found a note on the windscreen, and this note directed them to the Old Paynham police station, and that they may find the body of a woman there, and that it was no joke. They immediately went down, and in the bushes they did in fact find the body of a young woman. It looked like the body had been there for some time because it was in an advanced state of decomposition.
Tonight, a body dumped at an old police station but unnoticed for days.
The grisly discovery was made just before 11 last night. The woman's badly decomposed body was partially hidden by bushes in the front yard of the old station. Police say she'd been murdered.
Because of the arrangement of the clothing, her jeans had been pulled down and her panties had also been removed. There was a distinct suggestion that there had been some sexual offence committed prior to her death.
When you go to a scene, basically what the investigating police want to know is the manner of death. And when I looked at that case, it was immediately apparent that it was a homicide they were dealing with. It was a sexual assault homicide from behind. And the reason I say that is the upper clothing that remained on the body included a quilted shirt, and the quilted shirt had been twisted tightly around the neck. And that indicated that the cause of death was strangulation by her own clothing, strangulation by ligature.
Apart from how she died, police needed answers to two other important questions: who the victim was, and could they get any estimate on when she died?
Pathologists are quite good at identifying intervals since death in that first 24 hours. But in this case, the death was obviously a long time before that. The body was heavily infested with various forms of insect activity, so I knew that I couldn't help them. I knew it was important, but I couldn't help them, so I asked them to get an entomologist out of the scene.
Establishing the time of death is critical. And on this particular occasion, there were maggots on the body, which is a rather gruesome part of any murder investigation, but from a scientific and forensic point of view, the maggots can determine pretty much the exact time of death.
When I took the maggots that I'd collected from the murder victim's body back to the laboratory, I went about in the first place identifying the species of flies that they represented, to determine how long I thought those maggots had been in the body of the victim based on the likely temperature conditions that the maggots had experienced. The warmer it is, the quicker maggots will develop. So here I relied upon temperatures from the body as well as temperatures from the Bureau of Meteorology about the weather conditions in the area during the likely time that the body had been lying there. I estimated that the body had become infested by flies sometime during the morning of the 13th of April.
It meant that the victim had been murdered the night before, on Monday the 12th of April, some 5 days before her body was found.
With regard to who the deceased was, she had no personal effects. We didn't know other than the fact that she was obviously a young adult female with blonde hair. We didn't know who she was. But when I did the post-mortem, she had 3 missing teeth in the upper jaw and she had a number of gold restorations, and they were sufficiently odd that they would identify the deceased, providing someone reported her missing.
The victim is described as approximately 162 centimetres, 5 foot 4 inches tall. She had shoulder-length fair hair.
There were a number of females reported missing and similar in description, but because of the approximate age and the general description, it narrowed down to a lady who had been reported missing, Maya Jakic.
Apart from her age, height and hair colour, the missing persons report also indicated that the 30-year-old lived nearby to the crime scene. And more importantly, She wore a dental plate to hide 3 missing teeth.
The experts examined the actual dental records and they were able to say that positively it was Maya Jackick.
But Maya had been missing since the 6th of April, 6 days before the entomologist believed she had been murdered. So where had she been?
It was important to try and track her movements. Where had Maya been in the previous week? Who had she been mixing with? Because any of those people might have been suspects, could provide a motive for the murder.
What police were yet to realise was that on the same night she was strangled to death, the murderer had contacted them.
Yeah, there seems to be a body of some sort in the bushes there, I'm not too sure. I haven't gone near it. Where are you ringing from?
When the decomposed body of a young woman was found hidden among bushes, the manner of death was clear. She had been sexually assaulted and then strangled to death with her own clothing. But her identity was only made possible because of 3 missing teeth.
I just cooked my dinner and I was putting the dinner on the table. We watched the news and what I saw was a huge shock to me.
Maya Jackick's body was discovered on Saturday night after a note was left on the windscreen of a patrol car at the Norwood police station.
I just couldn't believe. I almost died of shock because I spoke to her mum just a few days ago. We're looking for her. Her mum was a couple of times a day passing the place where her body was covered with the branches without knowing that her daughter's body was lying on the ground.
According to the forensic entomologist, Maya's body had been lying there for 5 days. Her mother, however, had reported her missing 6 days before that time. So it was vital for the detectives to piece together her last movements.
Shortly after we'd established who the victim was, the investigation went to trying to obtain any information we could about Maya Jackick, her background, who knew her. It was very difficult because the more we tried to find out, the less information we were getting. There were dozens of people who actually knew her, but when it came down to who in fact she was or what they knew about her, they really knew nothing about her. And all the information we were getting was that she was wandering between Glenelg, the city, and her home at all times of the day and night.
Maya was well known to proprietors at the Martin shopping centre, where until about a month ago she was seen almost every day. They've spoken of a quiet but polite girl who always kept to herself.
Don't know exactly what she was doing around here, but I think only once in the past 10 months I'd seen her with a friend.
She didn't have many friends. I was like her last resort for everything. She didn't mix much with other people, no. Deep down, I think she was lonely. I think that maybe she had a little depression or something, and she didn't want to talk about that. I used to call her, you know, Maya, talk to me. Oh, she just didn't want to talk. All I wanted to know is who killed her and how the killer looks like. How somebody can do such a thing?
So far, the identity of the killer, like Maya's last days, remained a mystery. The note on the police car revealed no fingerprints. Detectives hoped the post-mortem would lead them to a suspect.
The importance of a sexual assault homicide these days is the DNA databank. With DNA technology, the ability of a particular piece of evidence to show that one person and no one else was responsible is highly specific. So our expectations, at least at that stage, were that we might find seminal fluid or hairs or fibres or any other contact trace evidence. But all the smears and swabs that I'd collected at the post-mortem came back negative. No DNA was found. In other words, no seminal fluid was identified.
Now, the reasons for that can be many and varied. Perhaps that there was no sexual contact, although we suspected that was unlikely to be the case. But perhaps the advanced state of decomposition can impact on that. But at the end of the day, we were not able to get any DNA.
The killer, it seemed, was totally without trace. He could be anyone and be anywhere. And at the time of the murder, there was a race in town.
He's going to get a rousing reception. Look at that go up. Craig Lowndes takes out
The Adelaide 500 Racing Carnival brought people from all over Australia, indeed from all over the world.
It was the gutsy V8 supercar race the crowd had come to see.
Visual programs here. The place is electric.
So this complicated the investigation, given that we really didn't have any idea as to who might have been the offender.
But then a breakthrough. Police learned that a call had come through on their hotline on the night the entomologist believed Maya had been murdered.
Police emergency.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, there's someone hanging around the old Paynham police station. Seems to be trying to break in there, I think.
That particular person was very, very important to the investigation because he certainly knew or saw something. And then, lo and behold, a short time later, we had information that came forward in relation to another 000 call where the ambulance was called.
Ambulance service? Yeah, I just walked past the old Paynham police station. There seems to be a body of some sort in the bushes there, I'm not too sure.
That call was also made on the Monday night.
Paynham Road, haven't gone near it. It's up off Paynham Road there.
In both instances, the police and paramedics went to the old police station mentioned by the caller. But there was no break and enter or a body, and the calls were dismissed as hoaxes. 5 days later, the note appeared, and fortunately they didn't go to the old police station, but came here to the old patrol base, where they found Maya's body in the bushes.
I think that we were in little doubt once we'd learned of the 2 000 calls and the note that they were all, or the one person was responsible for all of them. And it was fairly unlikely in our view that that person was an innocent bystander. We suspected that that person was in fact the offender.
Right, we'll get on ahead. What's your name? One side.
Because we can track the 000 calls. The first was made from a phone box quite near to where Maya's body had been located. The other 000 call was made from a phone box near the Royal Adelaide Hospital.
Where are you ringing from? A phone box? In the Adelaide? Yep. In the Royal Adelaide? Yep. So how do you know what's happening out at Paynham there? Well, I've just seen that there was a body there about half an hour ago. All right. You didn't stop to see what was happening there? No. No, all right. We'll get on ahead. What's your name? One side. Just let you know anyway. What's that?
The question that we were asking ourselves was the offender keeping an eye on the police investigation. Was he waiting and watching for the police?
30-year-old Maya Jakic had been strangled to death. Her body left in the bushes outside an old police patrol base. The killer had called police twice on the night he murdered her. And then 5 days later, police believed the same person placed a note on their patrol car. But while he left the note, he left no clues to his identity, except his voice.
Yeah, I just walked past the old Paynham police station. There seems to be a body.
We had to try and get that voice on the 000 call out to the public. It's not something that we'd done before, release a call from Crime Stoppers. But it was so important on this occasion, we believed that was the correct course.
This is 7 Nightly News with Graham Goodings and Jane Doyle.
Tonight, the tape police hope will help catch a killer. Police are asking you to watch and listen to our first story very carefully. We're going to show you a note sent to police and play an audio tape, either of which may lead to the killer of Maya Jakic, whose body was found at Paynham last month.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, there's someone hanging around the old Paynham police station. Seems to be trying to break in there, I think.
The voice of the man police believe holds vital clues in the Maya Jakic murder case. Major crime detectives have taken the extraordinary moves of releasing the tapes and note in a desperate attempt to get public help.
Well, we're certainly hoping that someone perhaps recognises the voice.
Anyone with information is asked to call Bank SA Crime Stoppers on 1800 333 000.
Hundreds of calls came in, but there were no solid leads.
We had hundreds of calls in respect to those 2 areas. People saying that the caller was someone they went to school with, next door neighbours, a variety of reasons why they thought the voice was someone and the author was someone else, but unfortunately it got us nowhere.
2 weeks later, they tried again.
With information drying up, detectives have again appealed for a mystery 000 phone caller to make contact with them and tell them what he knows.
Even a reward for $100,000 couldn't do the trick.
Unfortunately, some of these investigations do reach a stage where you've followed absolutely every possible line of inquiry, and each line of inquiry becomes a dead end.
The case remained open but was scaled down. 2 years on from Maya's murder, the team were now occupied with another mystery, the disappearance of 18-year-old Megumi Suzuki. Megumi had left her residence on Friday, August the 3rd at 7:41 a.m. She headed to school, and the security video showed her leaving at 8 minutes past 3 in the afternoon.
Our initial information was that the last time that Megumi was seen alive was on the Friday afternoon down on the Rundle Mall having some coffee with some friends.
And the last person who she spoke to, she said that she believed that Megumi was going to Grenfell Street to catch the O-Bahn back to the place where she was living.
But it appeared Megumi never made it home on that Friday night.
I did phone her residence and ask if they could see if she was there. They said no, she wasn't in the room, and they said nothing had been touched, the bed hadn't been slept in, and also it had been the census weekend. I don't know if you remember when everybody was counted, and the census form was still there from the Friday night. So I was a bit concerned, and I had emailed the parents as well by then. Her mother had said that she never went anywhere without her teddy bear, and I knew then that there was something very wrong. I telephoned her boyfriend, her ex-boyfriend, to find out if he had heard from her, and he said no, he hadn't, and he had been worried about her as well because it was unusual for him not to hear from her. So I was quite convinced by that time that I needed to contact the police, which I did first thing on Thursday morning.
Megumi Suzuki was last seen by a friend at a city bus stop. Police began distributing missing person posters outside the Maya Centre late this afternoon.
At this stage, we didn't really know whether we had a homicide investigation or simply a missing person.
With posters, publicity and appeals in full swing, a man rang in with crucial evidence. He was a maintenance worker on the bus track that Megumi took home each weekday afternoon. And in the bushes nearby, he found her bag.
There was an identification card with her picture on there. There were numerous books with her name on it, and also a lot of her personal items.
I think the finding of her school books was the first step we had to say, I think that this is going to be a suspicious one. It raised our concern that Megumi may have met with foul play.
SES and mounted police scoured the scrub. The police helicopter was also called in.
There were a number of things actually missing from her possession, and one was her mobile phone. She also had a CD Walkman, which she always took with her, and that was also missing.
But what they did find was her credit card and a bus ticket. And those two items took her to one place, a BP service station in the opposite direction of her home.
So that alerted the investigators to the fact, well, why had she been travelling down there? Who might have she seen down there? And how might that information assist us in our investigation?
The BP console operator could pinpoint from his records what time and exactly what she purchased.
She had purchased a SIM card for her telephone. That alerted us to her mobile phone. We were able to then do some checks on the call charge records.
Megumi made 12 calls that night. The last, a text message, sent to her ex-boyfriend, who lived only a stone's throw away from the BP station.
It was fairly obvious now as to what was motivating Megumi to be at that particular location at that time. It was to go and see the boyfriend.
The last known sighting of 18-year-old Megumi Suzuki was at a BP station where she had bought a phone card. The records showed her last call was a text message to her ex-boyfriend.
We knew at that stage that he lived in the very near vicinity of the BP service station.
We actually spoke to him and he was with friends at another location that night. I think it was the picture show.
He was very, very helpful in our investigation. He was distraught and was making every attempt to assist the police in trying to locate Megumi. It was about a week later that he contacted police with a piece of underclothing, in fact a pair of pants, that he suspected may have belonged to Megumi. So it was important to determine and confirm, were they Megumi's?
In her room at the student residence, detectives found underwear of similar styles.
The distinguishing factor that did stand out was the fact that all her underwear, or the majority of her underwear, were all matching sets.
The bra that matched those pants wasn't located.
But through subsequent forensic testing, we were able to get a DNA match and confirm positively that they were her clothes.
It was a worrying sign, more so as her pants had seemed to appear out of thin air, just like the note on the patrol car.
It was interesting as to how did those pants get there? Were they placed there? Did they blow there by the weather?
But with no real evidence that Megumi had met with foul play, all the police could do was keep asking the public for their help.
Police will begin targeting city nightclubs as part of their search for missing Japanese student Megumi Suzuki.
Police will hand out the posters this weekend to the city's dance and karaoke clubs, where Megumi was a regular.
Although we have grave fears, at this stage I think that there is still a glimmer of hope. We will continue to work on that basis.
Megumi's parents have flown from Tokyo. They've released a statement thanking police and appealing for more information to help find their daughter. We love our daughter very much. We pray that in the coming hours there will be some positive news.
And it appeared their prayers were answered.
The witness and his wife claims they were only metres away from the missing student outside the Arkaba Hotel at 11:30 this morning. A dozen police patrol cars converged on the area. Streets surrounding the Howard Florey Reserve were blocked off as the dog squad and uniformed patrols thoroughly checked homes and questioned residents.
This particular sighting was from a person who knew Megumi and was associated with her accommodation.
I actually spoke to him myself and other detectives spoke to him. We were satisfied that he believed the person he saw was Megumi. And as a result of that, we thought, well, hello, yes, she's still alive.
I'm just glad that she's been sighted because she's not dead. That's the main thing. That's good news.
Good for her parents to know that she's okay and safe and sound. You wouldn't want to be in that position yourself.
The parents of missing teenager Megumi Suzuki have made an emotional plea to their daughter to come forward to police.
Megumi, もしこれを見ていたら早く出てきてほしい。
Megumi, if you saw this, please come forward as soon as possible. Father and mother can't sleep every day.
めぐみ、何も心配しなくていいから。
Don't worry about anything. Please come forward as soon as possible. Father and mother will protect you from now on. Please come forward.
But Megumi never made contact, and there were no more sightings.
At the one moment we thought that she might still be alive, then those hopes were dashed. It was a rollercoaster ride to us. We can only try and imagine the rollercoaster ride that the parents were on at that particular point in time.
8 weeks after Megumi had gone missing, her photo was put onto a new police website that had just been developed.
And on that same website, we were able to place the unsolved murder of Maya Jakic.
The police are also making a new bid to solve the murder of 30-year-old Maya Jakic, whose body was found over 2 years ago. Detectives have turned to the internet, trying to identify the man who made 2 emergency calls on the night of her murder.
Yeah, I just walked past the old Paynham police station. There seems to be a body of some sort in the bushes there.
People could dial onto the internet and listen to that call from indeed anywhere in Australia or perhaps anywhere in the world. So that wider exposure we thought was both innovative and critical in trying to get that breakthrough that we needed.
The strategy would work. Police were about to find out the long-needed identity of the caller and Maya's killer.
I listened to it about half a dozen times. I closed my eyes and listened to it, and I could see Mark talking to me.
Police knew that the killer of Maya Jakic was most likely the same person who made 2 emergency calls on the night that Maya was murdered. Who he was had eluded them. That was until the internet pulled him into its web.
The following is a taped voice of a male person who contacted police and ambulance 000 facilities during the...
And one particular person heard his voice.
1999. Police are seeking your assistance to identify the caller.
I logged on and found the tape and listened to it, and listened to it, and listened to it. And I listened to it about half a dozen times. I closed my eyes and listened to it.
Yeah, I just walked past the old Paynham police station. There seems to be a body.
And I was 90% sure that it was my brother. Perhaps Mark was involved with this crime that seemed rather out of character for Mark. He'd never been violent as far as I knew. So I listened to the tape again. And I remember I walked up the passageway a little bit and closed my eyes so there was some distance from the voice.
I don't know, I can vaguely see him. He's got a flashlight flashing around the place.
Inside or?
In and around the place.
And I could see Mark talking to me when I could hear that voice. So I sort of decided then that I had to ring Crime Stoppers. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It's there's no damage done. But if I'm right, well, they need to know about it.
Stephen Rust said that he'd been away for a number of years and had just come back. He's seen the publicity, he heard the voice.
Yeah, there's someone hanging around the old Paynham police station.
And I could see the dilemma he was going through, because here he was identifying the voice as being that of his brother, Mark Rust.
Mark Rust was certainly known to us. We had his name in our files for more minor sexual offences.
It was a rather sickening feeling to realise that perhaps Mark had stepped over the line because he'd been in trouble for such a long time with the police and going to jail and parole. The family knew that he was building up and getting worse each time, and that eventually he would do something really terrible and end up in jail for the rest of his life. But at the same time, we'd always hoped that, you know, he wouldn't go that way. So when it was fairly certain that it was Mark who was involved, it was a nasty feeling. It left a very unpleasant taste.
While the police were convinced the 000 caller was Mark Rust, it wasn't enough to make an arrest. They would also need to prove that the note left on the patrol car was his handiwork. And Stephen Rust had provided them with a letter from his brother for comparison.
Our task was to look at the handwriting and see if it had been written by the person. One of the more outstanding features was the double cross on the T, which was a feature of both the specimen letter and the question note. Another feature was the way that the letters were spaced in the word, for example, in the word good. They were very tight and overlapping. And all of the words, particularly where they could be directly compared, words like the and of, and these were very similar in their appearance. In general, every single letter, every single word that could be directly compared showed very close similarities in both their form and in their appearance. I was convinced that the same person had written both the letter that was found on the patrol car and the specimen letter.
So after assessing all of the evidence, we were satisfied that we had a reasonable case, and as a consequence of that, the detectives went out and made the arrest.
A 37-year-old man has been arrested and charged with the murder of Maya Jakic 2 years after she died.
Late yesterday afternoon in Port Augusta, detectives arrested and charged a man.
They had found Mark in jail. His minor sexual offences had progressed to rape, and he was currently on remand in a prison some 300 kilometres away from where Maya was murdered.
Police don't believe there was any relationship between Miss Jakic and the accused. Her parents in Croatia have been contacted by detectives and say they're very pleased about the arrest.
Shortly after Mark Rust was charged and went back to the prison at Port Augusta, he obviously needed someone to confide in because he was probably shocked that he was eventually arrested. This resulted in an informant contacting us who passed on some very valuable information.
Mark had remained silent when he had been questioned and then charged with Maya's murder. It was a different story back at the prison.
The informant said that Mark had told him that he saw a tall, blonde girl walking along Paynham Road. He spoke to her. A struggle ensued, and then he pulled her into the bushes where he had sex with her, and he eventually ended up strangling her.
But it was what the informant told the police next that was totally unexpected.
As a result, we had to move very quickly and make a search of Mark Rust's cell and his belongings.
What they were looking for and found was a CD player. A CD player similar in shape and colour to the one that missing school student Megumi Suzuki had with her on the day she disappeared.
We contacted the mother in Japan, and she was in a situation where she could produce all the relevant document dating back and tracing that sale with the serial number to her and Megumi in Japan.
Of course, finding Rust in possession of some of Megumi's property didn't in itself mean that he'd committed the murder. So whilst it was an important part, there was still a lot more work to be done by the team of investigators.
37-year-old Mark Rust had been arrested and charged with the murder of Maya Jakic. His brother had identified his voice as that of the 000 caller, and a sample of his writing matched exactly that of the note left on the police car. Now Mark was a suspect in the murder of 18-year-old Megumi Suzuki. Her CD Walkman had been found in his cell after an informant contacted the police.
The informant also said in relation to Suzuki that he approached her. He had sex with her, and he said to her, "Don't look at me, whatever you do." She looked at him, saw his face, and as a result he attempted to strangle her. And then he actually killed her by hitting her on the head with a rock. We were also told that Megumi had been murdered on a vacant paddock and that he had burnt clothing or something there. As a result of the information, we went back to the BP service station. Directly opposite was a vacant block of land. We made a search of the vacant block of land and we found the seat of a fire.
The fire brigade was contacted. They confirmed they had put out a small fire on that vacant lot on the very night Megumi had disappeared.
Near the fire we found a rock which could possibly have been used in the offence. We found bits of burnt clothing and arm bracelets, and we knew that these were jewellery worn by Megumi Suzuki.
But Megumi's body had yet to be found. The only clue from the informant was that Mark Rust had dumped her into an industrial bin.
We combed the area based on some directions that were provided, and we did in fact find a bin at the rear of some premises on Goodwood Road.
The circumstantial evidence against Mark Rust was stacking up. But before they could make an arrest, the investigators needed to be absolutely sure that this was the bin where Mark had placed Megumi after he killed her, and they turned to the Rust family for help.
This must have been an enormous dilemma for them to assist the police, in effect, to establish and clarify whether Mark Rust was responsible. Nevertheless, they did provide that assistance, and they were able to confirm that the waste bin had a hippo on the side. The bin that we were looking at had similar markings, and that was the final lead that we needed to satisfy that we had a reasonable case to arrest Rust.
I was shocked about the Maya Jakic thing because it just came out of the blue and really sort of, you know, knocked the wind out of our sails. And then when Jerry told us about Megumi Suzuki, it just fitted together very nicely with what Mark had been doing. So I sort of believed it pretty much straight away.
Megumi's body hasn't been found, but it's understood it may have been dumped in an industrial bin and later at the Wingfield rubbish tip.
We have been praying for our daughter to be alive under any circumstances for the last 3 months. But this week we received the saddest news we could have had.
When they arrived out in Australia, Jerry Feltus took them down to the rubbish dump. And I think that that was obviously a very, very traumatic moment for the parents to sit on the side of a rubbish tip, knowing that somewhere amongst literally hundreds of tonnes of rubbish there was the body of your daughter. So we certainly felt obligated to try and do everything possible to recover Megumi's body, and that was the next challenge for us.
But first, the grisly search for the murdered Japanese student, 18-year-old Megumi Suzuki, has begun at a Wingfield landfill site.
Megumi was dumped at the site nearly 4 months before, so numerous layers of baled rubbish were discarded until the level they believed she would be in was located. Then those bales were broken apart and searched.
We had to go through every bale. We were looking for things that related back to a particular date. We had to go through newspapers, invoices, everything with dates on it to ensure that we were in the correct area and we weren't moving out of it. You were going through trying to find things which kept you on track.
And after 11 days, and after removing tens of thousands of tonnes of rubbish, they were in the exact spot, and Megumi's body was found.
There was a mixture of relief and sorrow to think that someone could meet such an untimely death in the way that Megumi was murdered, and then to have a body dumped in the location that it was dumped was absolutely horrific.
The amazing thing about finding the body of Megumi Suzuki is that she still had her boots on, she still had clothing on, and the bra that she was wearing was an identical match to the pants which her ex-boyfriend had found in the laneway months earlier near the vacant block of land.
We believe that our daughter was found, thanks to the efforts of everyone involved in her search. We realise it was a very difficult task considering the circumstances. It is no exaggeration to say it was a miracle to find her so quickly.
But Rust's confession to murdering Megumi didn't come quickly. He maintained his innocence, as he did for the murder of Maya Jakic. Then, exactly 1 year after Megumi's body was found, he changed his plea.
There's been a shock development in the murder of Japanese student Megumi Suzuki. A 37-year-old man from the northeastern suburbs has pleaded guilty.
I know that you've done this. You know you've done it, and you need to put your hand up for it so that there's not a big court case. These poor families aren't dragged through this muck, and we can all get over it as best we can and bring some closure to everyone's life.
6 months later, Mark Rust also admitted to the murder of Maya Jakic on the 12th of April 1999.
The families of 2 young women brutally murdered by a homicidal predator have given harrowing accounts of the loss of their loved ones.
On behalf of the families, friends gave heartbreaking accounts of how the murders have totally devastated dozens of lives. Fusei Simpson described the Suzuki family's anguish, quoting Megumi's mother, "It makes me insane when I think of her being treated like rubbish." Ida Gregov related the thoughts of Maya's mother, Yagada. Why would anyone want to kill Maya like an innocent bird and cover her with branches and cover his dirty crime?
I done it with all my heart. And I did call Maya's mum and I said, this is what I done. I actually spoke on your behalf. And I saw the killer. And it's done, I said, it's finished.
Mark Rust was sentenced to life in jail without parole for both murders. The judge ruled that the 39-year-old was incapable of controlling his sexual urges and would be detained until further order.
You ask yourself, why has he done that? How could he have done that? Because we all grew up together in the same house. It's emotionally quite devastating to realise that someone so close to you in your immediate family can commit such a crime. It's really... It's devastating. It's I don't know, I can't really find the words to describe just how bad it makes you feel. It's a dreadful feeling.
The Suzuki family are still very distressed. They are really feeling it at the moment because they had great expectations for their daughter.
Maya's mother took her daughter's body back to Croatia, where she visits the grave every day.
We both lost a very, very special person. A lovely daughter and the most beautiful friend I ever had. For once, she can rest in peace.
Simon Says is a simple game with simple rules. You learn quickly to do what Simon says, or you're out of the game. But when Simon is an international gangster and he says, smuggle heroin, disobeying his instructions can have fatal consequences.
We received a call to say that an attempted abduction had occurred at Regal Court in Glen Waverley and that the witness had seen an Asian male begging for his life and was down on his knees, crying, and obviously was in a distressed state.
The second witness saw the two men then put the man into the boot of the car and then drove out of Regal Court. Fortunately for the police, the witness was able to record the registration number of the car, and those details were passed on to the police.
BK to all units in the Glen Waverley area. The vehicle we're looking for in relation to a possible abduction is Foxtrot Romeo November 929. Stand by, I'll get the usuals.
As police at the scene waited for the usuals, being the ownership of the car, they took a closer look at where this young Asian male had been abducted.
Glen Waverley, 7, I've come across a gentleman's coat in the driveway, probably or possibly the address from where the victims come from. I've also found a cat nearby, so I'd definitely say the altercation occurred in the driveway at this address.
And we also noticed there was a car in the driveway and the vehicle was unlocked, so we thought this was the victim's car. We door knocked the house and there was no one home, and the house was locked and secured. So we checked the vehicle for registration to establish a name to the car to see whether it was connected to the house.
November Romeo Kilo 353. It should be a 96 Toyota Lexus sedan silver.
It was the right vehicle, but the registered owner, 22-year-old Leanne Twan, lived elsewhere.
408, could you attend that address, please? Make some inquiries.
When police first went to the registered owner's house of the Lexan, they met Tao, who was Lee's fiancée.
The two were expecting their first child and had bought this house. The house where the car was parked was being rented by them while renovations were underway.
Tao told police that she and Lee had been awaiting an electrician to come there to give them a quote. When the electrician failed to show up, Lee drove the Lexan back to Regal Court, where he had the phone number for the electrician. Tao said she was concerned that he hadn't come back, that she'd attempted to contact him and was unsuccessful.
408, any suggestions from the young lady as to why this may have occurred?
Before I just stand by, she's actually made a phone call to her mother, who she says may have some knowledge of it. She hasn't been able to tell us why. I'll just get back in a sec.
Roger.
All right, we've got the girlfriend on the phone to the victim's mother, who says she may know something about the reasons the boat's been taken. She refused to discuss the reasons on the phone.
So arrangements were made for her to come down to the Glen Waverley police station.
Meanwhile, police had discovered the car used in the abduction had been bought at a car yard only 10 days before. It had been sold to an 18-year-old by the name of Hoy.
When we went to the address, Mrs. Vang, Hoy's mother, was home. Hoy was at school and he had the car in his possession at the school. We went to the school and spoke to Hoy, and he had told us that the car had been stolen 3 days prior. Hoy had not reported the car being stolen to the police. He thought that he would report it after school on this particular day that we were there.
As a result, both Hoy and his mother, Mrs. Van, were asked to come to the police station to give statements about the missing car. In another room, police were interviewing the kidnapped victim's mother, Mrs. Ha, and his fiancée.
And when was the last time you saw your son?
Mrs. Ha was very calm throughout the situation, considering that her son was at risk. She was obviously trying to assist the police as much as she could in locating her son.
Mrs. Ha said that she believed she knew who was responsible for the kidnapping of her son Lee. And it was an Asian businessman, a man by the name of Phuc, that she'd met some months earlier. Phuc was based in Hong Kong. Mrs. Ha was a clothing importer, and he had approached her asking her to use her business as a front or as a means of him importing heroin into the country. She told Phuc she didn't want any part of it, and she refused to assist him in any way.
When Mrs. Ha refused to go into partnership with Phuc, he then made a demand for $400,000. The demand was made on the basis that he had disclosed to her what his illegal activities were, thereby jeopardising any future importations into Australia. He demanded that Mrs. Ha then pay him that $400,000 by way of restitution. When she refused, over several months there was threats being made by Phuc that there would be harm fall upon Mrs. Ha's family should she not pay the money.
It was apparent that Phuc's threat had come true. And when police entered the premises he rented, they discovered a clock was ticking.
When they went back to the house, they found that the house had been ransacked. But while they're there, they also found a note. She said it was in Lee's handwriting. It was written in Vietnamese. It basically said that he'd gone with Phuc's people and to tell his mother that she had 72 hours to pay the money that Phuc was asking for.
We know that it's a live ticking bomb. The fuse has been lit, and it's up to us to stop that detonation occurring and to find the person alive.
22-year-old Leon Tuan had been kidnapped, seemingly because his mother had refused to import heroin and then refused to pay $400,000 for the privilege of turning the offer down. She was currently in the police station making a call to Hong Kong, to the person who had ordered her son's abduction, Truong Hong Phuc.
When she spoke to Phuc again reinstated his demand for the money to be paid over, and if the money wasn't paid, he suggested that there would be harm to Lee. It wasn't play school, this was a genuine kidnapping with real concerns for the well-being and the welfare of Lee.
If his criminal record was any indication, Phuc meant business. When police here contacted Hong Kong authorities, they learned he'd been jailed for manslaughter and was a major player in the international drug trade. But it was a connection here in Australia that was of great interest in the investigation.
When we spoke to Mrs. Ha about Phuc and how she first met him, she told police that Phuc was actually introduced to her through Mrs. Van. Phuc was actually Mrs. Van's brother. And Mrs. Van is the mother of Hoy, the registered owner of the Camry that was used in the kidnapping.
Mrs. Van and her son were currently giving statements about the missing car that they told police had been stolen.
We were able to identify that some 3 days prior to the kidnapping, the vehicle had been intercepted on the Hume Highway heading towards New South Wales.
And it was intercepted by police again in Goulburn for another traffic infringement. The driver was spoken to by police, his details were obtained. The driver was identified as a person by the name of Long, who gave an address in Victoria. We'd made inquiries at the address that he'd given. He wasn't anywhere to be found. So surveillance was placed on his premises and other areas that he was known to frequent.
Police were also keeping an eye on Mrs. Van's place. Both had links to the car, and in turn to the kidnapping. And Mrs. Van was the sister of the man who had ordered Lee to be taken. Lee was somewhere, and 24 hours had passed.
Over the first 48 hours, there would have been something like 6 or 7 phone calls between Mrs. Ha and Fook. And on each occasion, the primary objective of the phone call was to attempt to have Fook acknowledge that he was involved in the kidnapping in some way and to have some sort of communication with Lee to confirm that he was alive. Fook adamantly refused to discuss anything to do with Lee and maintained that the only reason he was contacting Mrs. Ha was that he was owed a debt of $400,000 and that he wanted that money repaid.
Police desperately needed to find Lee before the deadline expired. They needed to identify the actual kidnappers and they needed to find Fook.
Mrs. Ha mentioned on the first night to police that about a month earlier she'd got a fax from Fook where it nominated 4 different bank accounts in Hong Kong, and they were the bank accounts that he wanted her to put the $400,000 into.
As police didn't know where Fook was currently staying, they hoped the details on the fax would provide that information. But it would take time.
That evening there was a call made from Mrs. Ha to Fook. We asked that Mrs. Ha ask for a further extension on the 72-hour deadline. Fook agreed to a 24-hour extension until midday the following day.
The time had allowed the Hong Kong authorities to establish the locations of the account holders. Each was put under surveillance, just as the ones in Australia had been. But the extension time had now come and gone, and Fook had made no contact. Then, 2.5 hours later, he called.
Fook indicated that the meeting would take place in the vicinity of the Spencer Street railway station the next day. The surveillance people, the special operations group, they were all briefed. The area had to be looked at for the best possible positions for everyone to be put into place.
On that next day, Mrs. Ha awaited specific instructions.
Mrs. Ha was obviously going through a pretty stressful time, but the way she conducted herself, she was just amazing. She was very strong and seemed fairly composed for what she was faced with.
The investigators were then alerted by surveillance officers that 4 men had arrived near the drop-off point.
They weren't going about normal business of anyone coming and going from the railway station. They seemed like they were waiting for something to happen. Just their mannerisms and their movements and their appearance, that they were identified pretty quickly.
At one stage, one was seen to be making a call on a mobile phone. Simultaneously, Mrs. Ha had just received a phone call.
This time the call wasn't from Fook. A different voice told her that she needed to go to a particular area at the Spencer Street station and to expect someone to collect the money. She was told to come alone.
If the person that was giving directions to Mrs. Ha in fact was one of the collectors at the railway station, then that person would have intimate knowledge as to the whereabouts of Lee.
She was put into a taxi. The taxi was driven by a member of the police force for her safety, obviously, and he was going to take her down to the railway station where the exchange was going to take place.
After a harrowing 5 days and no phone contact with her kidnapped son, Mrs. Ha was about to exchange $400,000 for his safe return.
Fook told Mrs. Ha that he was sending down a pawn as he referred to him, to collect the money, and that within 2 hours of that occurring, she would get a further phone call that would give her the location of her son.
That was the afternoon before. Now, residences both here and overseas were ready to be raided and searched, and Special Operations Group members were ready for the handover.
Once an exchange was made, the 4 that had been identified at the railway station, they'd be kept under surveillance in the hope that they would then take us back to a premises or some sort of contact either with Fook or with Lee or with any of the kidnappers, any of the people involved in the whole situation.
But that hope was quickly dashed.
One of the males did actually see some of the covert arrest crews in position, and pretty much immediately he was seen to get onto a phone. And he could have been making contact with Fook or with any of the kidnappers. So the arrest crews were given the instruction to arrest the males straight away. And at that same time, all the various crews that were maintaining surveillance on the addresses in Victoria and also in Hong Kong were notified to execute search warrants.
As this unfolded, Mrs. Ha received a phone call.
The caller was unhappy with Mrs. Ha, and they didn't think Mrs. Ha was playing the game properly. She was further instructed to make a phone call within an hour to receive further instructions.
But when she called Fook's number, it continually went to voicemail.
The main priority was Lee's whereabouts and whether the events of that day had any effect on his welfare.
At this stage, the police had in custody the 4 men who were now being questioned.
They basically gave an account of being asked to collect some money, and they were going to receive an amount of cash, I think it was $5,000, just for collecting the money from a lady. But they weren't giving any other indication that they had any other connection with the kidnapping or any other knowledge of Fook or Lee's whereabouts. And as a result of that, they were released.
The raids on the houses here in Australia weren't promising either. No evidence, no Lee. But in Hong Kong, where 2 men were arrested, there was a definite link to the kidnapping.
In the execution of the search warrants in Hong Kong, we were able to locate the original fax that was forwarded to Mrs. Ha with the demand, plus the fax machine itself.
More importantly, there was a suggestion that Fook himself may have been there.
There was an address book that contained Mrs. Van's details from Clayton, the mother of Hoy, the registered owner of the Camry that was used in the kidnapping. So there's a few items there that gave a direct link with Fook.
Neither police nor the distraught family have heard from the kidnappers for more than 10 days. Detectives now hold grave fears for Tuan Lee's safety.
They have principals overseas that have organised and orchestrated the kidnapping. They've obtained the services of local people here in Victoria to carry out the actual kidnapping.
In an effort to confirm the safety of Lee and to attempt to secure his release, a media conference was conducted where Tao and Mrs. Ha pleaded for the safe return of their son Lee.
The distraught girlfriend and the mother of the kidnapped man are too frightened to show their faces, but pleaded for 22-year-old Tuan Ann Lee's safe return.
If you got my fiancé, can you please release him for me? Because I'm pregnant. I'm a young lady, and I really need my husband's help.
Fighting back tears, Mr. Lee's mother spoke through an interpreter.
Please release my son to be back safely with his family. My son is innocent.
But the only outcome was the discovery of the car used in the abduction. It was found locked and neatly parked, only streets away from the scene of the crime.
The first priority was to get the car out to our forensic science laboratory in the hope that it could shed any sort of evidence, whether it be fingerprints, DNA, samples of the clothing, hair, anything at all from any part of the car. They didn't find anything in the car. One thing they found was traces of some type of powder or cleaning compound, so it was pretty apparent that the car had been pretty thoroughly cleaned before it had been left in Seaford. It was a bit disappointing to find the car in that state, but you'd almost expect that that was going to be the case. Either the car was found in that state or it was found a shell somewhere. We arranged for Hoy to come back in to give us an indication as to what may have been different with the car or may have been missing from the car, and he told us that he believed that there was a P plate, a floor mat and a street directory missing from the car. And then almost a month to the day after the car had been found, we got a phone call from a member from the homicide squad to say that Lee's body had been found in a drain in Noble Park.
The male person was found wearing clothing that was similar to that worn by Mr. Lee when he was kidnapped, and it was apparent that he had tattoos that were consistent with those that Mr. Lee had.
Police divers arrived at the Noble Park drain today, scouring a 2-kilometre stretch near where a man's body was discovered late yesterday. It was partly decomposed. Detectives believe it had been in the drain at least a few days. School children spotted it through an open grate. Search and rescue officers began an arduous line search, carefully combing surrounding grassland for any clue.
At the post-mortem, it was established that the cause of death was a single gunshot wound to the head. There was an X-ray of the skull which identified the .22 round inside the skull. Ballistics were able to establish that the firearm was discharged only a short distance from his head, execution style.
It was a pretty cold crime with no personal attachment. Almost look at it as it was like a business transaction.
The case had now gone from one of trying to find Lee alive to trying to find his murderers. And one piece of forensic evidence that was not relevant at the time of his kidnapping would now become a vital clue in tracking them down.
Police have confirmed that a body found in a drain in Noble Park was that of a man kidnapped from outside his Glen Waverley home 6 weeks ago.
Divers searched through more than a kilometre of drain over the weekend following the discovery of Mr. Lee's body. Homicide detectives say the post-mortem results show the body was dumped down this grate into the underground drainage system somewhere between 2 and 6 weeks ago.
It certainly was consistent with the time that he'd been kidnapped. He may have only been alive for 2 or 3 days from the kidnapping to when he was put in the drain.
22-year-old Tuan Ann Lee was shot through the head in an execution-style killing.
We have a kidnapping that has gone horribly wrong to the extent that after the kidnappers have not had their demands met, they have killed their victim.
Once the homicide squad became involved, it was our role to look at all the evidence that was available to see if any person could be incriminated with the kidnapping and the murder. I went back to the photos of the initial crime scene. I identified a Marlboro baseball cap which was located on the footpath of Mr. Lee's address.
We knew that the cap didn't belong to Lee, and through a process of elimination we were able to determine that it wasn't owned by any of the residents of the court. So we had a strong inference that it had been dropped by the kidnappers. The witnesses that observed the kidnapping had seen Lee struggling with the kidnappers before he was bundled into the boot.
There were 2 men beating another man in the stomach, and then a car with the boot open reversed back into the court, and the man that was being hit started crying. He was calling out, "Help, help."
It was quite probable that the cap had been knocked off in the struggle and left at the scene by the kidnappers.
The fact that the cap was found was important to us because with any baseball cap or cap that's worn, there's obviously could be hair follicles located inside the cap, or sweat can be found on the brim of the cap. That DNA could be matched to the DNA of certain individuals who might be suspected of being involved in the crime.
And as a result of examination of the Marlboro cap, 3 separate DNA profiles were identified on the band inside the cap.
But those profiles didn't match any on the police database, and detectives hoped another avenue of inquiry would give them a lead.
I made contact with the brand manager of Marlboro in Australia. He was able to inform me that the cap was an original Marlboro product and that it could only be obtained as a gift when you purchased 2 cartons of Marlboro cigarettes at duty-free shops at American airports.
$90,000 of these caps had been given away. And finding the person or persons who had worn one of them 12,000 kilometres away here in Melbourne was almost impossible. So detectives put that line of inquiry to one side and looked for further clues to the kidnappers closer to home.
It was important to investigators to find the house where Lee had been held hostage, because every contact leaves us traces, and we were hopeful to get some traces of the kidnappers at the house.
Police believed that it was likely that Lee was held somewhere near where his body had been initially dumped into the drainage system.
Basically, at different stages along the drainage system, there is a steel grate, and we were looking for a grate that had been removed or replaced or broken, and that's where Mr Lee could have been put into the drainage system, but all of the drains seemed to be intact. So we then went to real estate agencies in the Springvale area to ascertain whether there was any premises who had been rented or leased for a short period of time which would be consistent with what the kidnappers would be looking for. And we were lucky enough to find in one real estate agency that Mrs Van had attended and rented a property approximately a month prior to the kidnapping. She only wanted the premises for a short period of time and broke the lease after a month, which was consistent with the times when Mr Lee went missing and after he was killed.
While the renting of the property didn't implicate Mrs Van in the kidnapping, the fact that she was the sister of Fook, their prime suspect, meant this information could not be ignored, just as the activities at the house were not ignored by neighbours.
Not only had neighbours observed men of age and appearance bringing mattresses into the premises, they also observed a car similar in description to that used by the kidnappers coming and going from the premises. We obtained a search warrant for the premises to look for evidence of the kidnapping. We were obviously hoping to find anything whatsoever to support the fact that Mr Lee had been held at the premises. Upon entering the house, the first thing we saw was the curtains had been drawn and were held together with clothing pegs, which in itself appeared to be suspicious. Searching the bathroom, there was a mass of dark-coloured hair in the shower. I was hopeful that was the deceased's hair. There was also some plastic cable ties which can be used as handcuffs. We were hoping that there may be DNA or hair located on those cable ties which would prove that they'd been worn as handcuffs by Mr Lee. However, those tests proved inconclusive.
So too were those done on the hair found in the shower. But in the shower was another item, a discarded cigarette butt.
The DNA found extracted from that cigarette butt was consistent with one of the strains of DNA that was located on the cap that was found at Mr Lee's address. So that indicated that whoever had smoked the cigarette potentially may have worn that cap.
And there was a street directory, similar to the one reported missing from the car used in the kidnapping.
When we searched the street directory, the scene of the kidnapping had been circled by someone.
Of all the streets in the street directory to be circled was Regal Court. This suggested to us that we're on the money.
The detectives were gathering vital clues, but they still had no killer. But that was about to change. Further forensic evidence was about to bring them face to face with a man known as the Executioner. Police had gleaned evidence from the place Lee had been kidnapped from and the likely place he had been kept before being killed. But they were no nearer to finding those who had shot him. But because Mrs Ha knew the mobile phone number that Fook had been using during his negotiations with her before and after the kidnapping, police began to track its movements. They were hopeful the records would lead them to those who undertook his dirty work.
It was apparent that he'd been calling a number of motels and hotels in the Sydney area. The Lansdowne motel came up a lot. There was a significant number of calls to that motel on the 3rd of May, which was only a couple of days after the kidnapping. So we went through every guest registration card on the 3rd of May, and there were two people who were of particular interest to us. One identified himself on the guest registration card as Michael Nguyen and provided an American address. The other was Bui Tuan, who provided an address in Los Angeles and a telephone number on his guest registration card.
The timing and arrival of these guests seemed more than a coincidence when police looked at the evidence that had been found in the Hong Kong raids.
One of the exhibits found in Hong Kong was a novel titled Until Proven Guilty. When we searched through the pages of the book, we found the telephone number of the Lansdowne Motel, and not only the telephone number, but the number 128 was written next to that number, which in fact was the room number that Bui Tuan was staying in at the Lansdowne Motel. Adjacent to that page was the home telephone number in America for Bui Tuan. What it gave police was fantastic evidence to support our claims that Phuc not only knew Bui Tuan, but knew that he was staying in that motel and that particular room at the time directly after the kidnapping. And the fact that the people staying were Vietnamese people who claimed to be from America was very significant to us, because the cap found at the crime scene could only be obtained from duty-free outlets in America, and these two people claimed to be from America.
When checks were done on the two, Michael Nguyen and his details were false. Bui Tuan, on the other hand, was who he claimed.
Upon identifying that Bui Tuan was a real person, we ascertained that he departed America on the 20th of April and he arrived in Australia 6 days before the kidnapping took place. We then asked the Federal Police member in the States to check all duty-free outlets at Los Angeles International Airport to ascertain whether any purchase of Marlboro cigarettes had been made by our target, Bui Tuan. When you buy any duty-free items in America, you have to produce your passport at the time of the purchase. There was no purchases made by Bui Tuan of cigarettes or any other duty-free items.
But on the flight manifest, it was interesting because a purchaser with a Vietnamese name had purchased some cigarettes and a cap. That person was sitting next to Bui Tuan. It seemed more likely to us that the purchaser of the cigarettes and the cap had given Tuan the cap. Interesting to us was the purchaser of the cigarettes, the Vietnamese man, was also the same man that had been caught up in the raids in Hong Kong by the Royal Hong Kong Police. A very, very strong link now to us.
Oh, it was one of the turning points in the investigation. It was the first real break we'd had in the whole time that we'd been investigating the case. It really turned the corner for us that we could physically identify one of the kidnappers. At that stage, we knew Phuc was involved, but we had no idea who physically was responsible for his kidnapping, and now we had fairly clear evidence that Bui Tuan was more than likely one of the kidnappers involved.
To test that theory, Bui Tuan was found in Los Angeles and brought into a sheriff's office over other matters, and a DNA sample was covertly taken.
And we were able to use that sample against the sample that we took out of the band of the hat. As a result, we were able to determine that Bui Tuan's DNA was on the band of the cap.
The news was encouraging, but extradition proceedings would be kept on hold. Police still didn't know where Phuc was, and they needed to discover the true identity of Bui Tuan's travelling companion.
We ascertained that Phuc had rung the Marco Polo motor inn, which is also in Sydney. And it was from there that we identified that Michael Nguyen had stayed there 4 days before the kidnapping. And when he booked into the motel and completed the guest registration card, he wrote down his name, Michael Nguyen, an address from Melbourne, and also that he was with a vehicle, FRN 929, which was the registration number of the car used in the kidnapping.
That car and its driver Long had been pulled over for speeding earlier on that same day as it travelled from Melbourne to Sydney.
It was fantastic for us because we had not only Long associated with that vehicle, we now had Michael Nguyen positively with that vehicle that was used in the kidnapping 4 days later.
The whereabouts of Long was unknown, and police still didn't know the true identity of Michael Nguyen to even begin looking for him. But when a check of that name was made with the Immigration Department, they had luck. A Michael Nguyen had been arrested on leaving Australia.
He had in excess of $10,000 Australian currency and a small vial containing heroin in his possession. He was interviewed, photographed, fingerprinted and processed, He received a fine for $500 and was put on the next plane to Vietnam. We sent the fingerprints and photograph to America for identification by the law enforcement agencies in that country, and it was then established that Michael Nguyen was a false name and Michael Nguyen was in fact Bui Tai Hu, the elder brother of Bui Tuan.
And his criminal pedigree was extensive, culminating in murder.
Bui Hu was known as the executioner. He was a hitman who basically travels the world to kill people.
And as the police were about to discover, he had no qualms in doing it.
So you've got no idea where he was going, so to speak? Well, they don't, whatever.
Detectives investigating the kidnap and murder of Leanne Tuan had identified 2 suspects who were connected to evidence found at the place he was abducted.
We knew that Bui Hu was connected to the car that was used in the kidnapping. His brother, Bui Tuan, was connected to the cap that was found at the kidnapping scene, and both of them had been contacted by Phuc while they were in Sydney at the motel.
Now Phuc's phone records would place them in Melbourne. He had called one mobile number 15 times during the day of the kidnapping and in the 3 days following.
Upon tracking the phone's movement, we were able to ascertain that it was making calls from the location of the kidnapping, from the location where the deceased was held prisoner, and also it was making calls from the motel, or the area of the motel, where the Bui brothers were staying after the kidnapping. It was apparent to us that it could only have been the Bui brothers that were using that phone. So from starting with just a few pieces of the jigsaw, we now had a substantial part of the puzzle solved. In our opinion, it was clear that Phuc was calling the shots from Hong Kong. Bui Tai Hu was the executioner of that group, and that he'd asked his brother, Bui Tuan, to assist him, and that Long was the driver of the kidnapped vehicle, and that he was chauffeuring the 2 Americans around Australia.
On the day of the kidnapping, police believed that Long dropped off his American companions at Lee's rental place sometime before midday.
The 2 Americans have secreted themselves inside the premises, while Long has then driven to a neighbouring suburb and waited for further instructions.
According to phone records, at 12:01, the Buis called Long's mobile. Police believed this was to alert him that Lee had just arrived home.
They have then forced him to write the ransom note. Shortly after that, the Bui brothers have then contacted Long and instructed him to return to the address. A struggle has then taken place. The cap has come off and they've then forced him into the boot. We presume that they drove straight to the kidnapping house, and there he was held against his will. We believe that 4 days after Mr. Lee was kidnapped, they shot him in the head.
On that 4th day, phone records put the Bui brothers at Melbourne Airport. It was 2:25 p.m. and they were about to fly to Sydney. Only 15 minutes later, Phuc called Lee's mother. Even though Lee was dead, he was still demanding his money.
So we weren't dealing with nice people here. We were dealing with very hardened, calculated criminals who all they're worried about is lining their own pockets.
The next day, the handover was scheduled. Phuc escaped the raids in Hong Kong, and in the days following, both the Bui brothers and Long left Australia.
At this stage, we had sufficient evidence to charge the main players with kidnapping and murder. Then we had even a bigger task of finding where they were. And even though the world's shrinking every day, it's very easy to hide with false passports.
It had taken the team over a year to get to this point, and it would be another year before their suspects began to emerge. Bui Hu, the executioner, was found in Vietnam. He himself was facing the firing squad over his involvement in a large-scale drug importation and exportation racket.
I flew to Vietnam and I interviewed him for a full day whilst he was on death row.
You know, anything whatsoever in relation to the kidnapping of Leon Twin? No. You know, anything about the murder of Leon Twin? No. Who do you think is responsible for this man's kidnapping and murder? You all there? Over there meaning Melbourne, in Melbourne. And were these people working on behalf of you? They were paid by us. They were paid by us. What who? Is that what you're saying? Yes. I put it to you that you were part of an international pyramid syndicate controlled by Cook. He instructed you to travel to Australia in company with your brother, who had been claimed. No. And I put it to you that when Leon Twin has returned home, you go there, assaulted him, put him in the boot of the car, and then travelled to Glendale Road and Springvale. There this man was held captive for a number of days, prior to you killing him with a .22 firearm, and then travelled to Sydney to escape the police. Sounds really interesting. Do you know what happened to the boy after he was killed? No. Have you read the papers? I couldn't hear so you've got no idea of how he was dumped, so to speak? Well, they dumped him, whatever. You will do whatever.
During the interview, Bui Hu had smoked. The cigarette butts were collected and his DNA was found next to that of his brother's on the baseball cap.
Had Bui provided information and evidence for us and confessed to his role in the kidnapping and murder, it would have saved his life. He could have been transported to Australia and faced life in jail and potentially been free in 25 years or less. However, he believed the threat to his family was way too great to incriminate Phuc, and he chose to face a firing squad in Vietnam.
However, the man who had such power over people's actions had been found. Phuc had threatened to kill a witness in a murder trial in London. And when police checked the alias he'd been using, a red alert from the Victorian police popped up.
I got a phone call at 3 a.m. from a Scotland Yard detective to say, "We know where your man is." And I just remember how relieved I felt. Phuc was arrested climbing out the bathroom window in London by the flying squad. You know, I was extremely happy that Phuc was in custody, but I guess I was really disappointed I wasn't in England putting the handcuffs on Phuc myself.
But following extradition proceedings, Steve Trigard got his wish.
We were about to take off at Heathrow. You know, I remember sitting next to him, handcuffed, thinking how I wish everyone that had worked on this job was sitting on that plane. You know, he was a big fish, but we eventually nabbed him.
Bui Tuan, the younger brother of the man executed, was also arrested. But the evidence against him wasn't enough to secure his extradition from the United States. Long, the driver, was caught in Hong Kong, but charges against him were dropped. Phuc's sister, Mrs. Van, went to trial alongside her brother for the kidnap and murder of Leon Tuan. A decision could not be made by the jury in regard to her, and further charges were not pursued. But her brother, Phuc, was found guilty. He received life imprisonment and will not be eligible for parole until 2024.
How can you describe a person who's taken the life of a young man who's barely 21 in order to continue on in his trade of heroin importation, which in itself leads to hundreds, if not thousands, of deaths?
It was an amazing ride, a roller coaster ride, to get to the stage where we're sitting in court hearing those wonderful words, guilty. It was the best day of my career. But you know what the moral of the story is? Every dog has his day.
When Andrew Astbury failed to turn up for work, His family and friends were immediately concerned. His van was parked in his driveway, and yet the 24-year-old was nowhere to be found. The investigation into his disappearance would lead detectives down a path of jealousy, hatred, and lies.
Andrew's van was parked in a position where it is normally parked, at the top of the driveway. Andrew's wallet was in the van along with his mobile phone, and according to all who knew Andrew, he just never went anywhere without it. However, there was no damage to the vehicle, there was no signs around the vehicle on immediate inspection that anything untoward had taken place.
We went into the house and it was quite obvious that Andrew hadn't slept in his bed. So it was obvious after speaking with friends, relatives and Andrew's girlfriend that he hadn't simply taken a day off work and gone to play golf and forgotten to tell someone about it.
Andy was a very hard-working, dependable person. He had a courier delivery service, basically, and the restaurants that he delivered to depended upon him delivering every morning their food for that day. So for him not to turn up at work and not to deliver the food was just totally exceptional.
Well, I suppose initially our thoughts were that any number of things may have occurred to Andrew. We weren't sure whether we were in fact investigating a crime at that stage or whether there was a legitimate reason for Andrew not to be found. So we had to explore all avenues.
The police raised things like, was he in money trouble? Was he involved in criminal activities or drug activities? As he was a distributor driving around a lot, was he involved in something that was not quite right?
As he searched the area, John Astbury found some unusual spots on the road outside his son's house.
And walking down the road, I saw what looked like crushed cherry marks, red, sticky. There were no cherry trees around, so I thought, well, maybe it's blood.
When we had a closer look at them, they appeared to be blood, and it certainly drew a more sinister tone to the investigation.
If it were blood, it didn't look like a life-threatening amount. So I guess I just was even more confused. Because if he was injured, then, why hadn't he made contact? We immediately sort of started to search the area to see if he was lying unconscious in the bush somewhere close by.
And there was another concern. Andrew's girlfriend, Shannon, told the police about his state of mind the last time she saw him, only 14 hours before.
It was close to Christmas time. He was working 2 jobs. He was working long hours on those 2 jobs, and that he was somewhat depressed that he couldn't afford to pay for Christmas presents, and that he was probably not going to be able to buy Shannon a Christmas present, which added weight to the theory that perhaps he may have caused self-harm.
Andrew had been seeing Shannon for just 5 weeks, but to all who knew them, they were very much in love.
He hadn't had a steady girlfriend. He'd had occasional friends. He'd had lots of friends who were girls, but he hadn't sort of been in love before. And it was quite fun to see, because he was happy.
25-year-old Andrew Astbury was last seen leaving his girlfriend's Eltham house just before 11 p.m. on Thursday. Today, John Astbury made an emotional plea for help in finding his son.
Well, if anybody knows anything, please will they come forward. And I guess, if for some reason Andy's out there, please will he get in touch. It was terribly difficult, those first few days, because you were getting more and more concerned about him being dehydrated or bleeding to death or having a broken leg and lying in pain somewhere. I can remember the second day, we were all out in Warrandyte State Park in the dark. We were out with torches and shouting his name. I mean, it was just ridiculous. There's no way you'd find him in the dark, but you couldn't go home and sleep. We ended up hiring a helicopter to fly around the area, and some of Andy's friends went up as spotters to, use binoculars and fly over the local bush to try and see if they could find anything.
But there was no sighting of Andrew.
It was summer in Australia, and if he were lying seriously injured in the bush, then his chances of survival quickly diminish. So you gradually begin to think about the worst.
24-year-old Andrew Astbury was missing. His van was found outside his home, yet his wallet and mobile phone remained on the driver's seat. Spots of blood, identified as Andrew's, were found on the roadway outside. With 4 days gone, his disappearance was now a major crime incident.
The family and girlfriend of Andrew Astbury have been desperate for news of the 25-year-old. Today, the homicide squad took over the investigation.
We believe that Andrew didn't leave his own accord. At this stage, we're unable to say whether Andrew is dead or alive.
Homicide were around very early. The first time you hear the word, it's pretty hard. So that sort of confirms your worst fears.
We were told by the local CLB that they'd used the SES over the weekend to search the area, mainly in the area where they'd found the blood droplets. Once we took over the investigation, we decided that we'd use our search and rescue team to search the entire area for the full length of the roadway outside his home and the grass bank outside the house as well.
And they discovered a blood-stained knife just off the edge of the roadway. There was quite a pool of blood in that area. And there was also a piece of cardboard with a very partial shoe impression.
Both the knife and the cardboard were sent back to the crime scene lab. Detectives hoping that either piece of evidence would lead them to or link them to a crime scene.
We had a look at the scene itself. It was obvious that there was too much blood for just a simple accident. We now believe that we were looking at a homicide rather than just a missing person.
So it now seemed Andrew was dead. But where was his body? The crime scene may well give detectives a clue. And for that, the forensic team would need to use a standard tool of their trade. And it required total darkness.
Luminol's a test that can find very small amounts of blood that aren't visible to the naked eye. It can be very helpful when you are following a trail that you can't actually see. It can pick it up in the night and it'll glow where the blood is.
Luminol normally just reveals blood splatter or small pools of blood, but this is quite an extensive trail.
And that blood trail extended over nearly 300 metres through the bushland and underneath trees and through the scrub. Could have lent itself that the person was just seriously injured at that stage, but with the amount of blood where the knife was found, it didn't lend itself that the person had walked off. More likely they'd been carried or dragged away. But was it someone large and strong that could carry a body away, or was it somebody helping to carry the body away? Once we got to the end of the Luminol trail, we found another pool of blood right beside a driveway. It just became apparent then that a vehicle had been used to then take the body away.
I had no doubt in my mind from that moment that Andrew was dead. Warranot Road's a pretty isolated location. So we took the move to put a caravan in the area, and you're obviously calling on the public for their help.
Two locals had remembered seeing a car parked just up the road from Andrew's house on the night he disappeared. They could recall some of the registration number, but more importantly, the car had very distinctive markings.
A young fellow turned up and said that on the night of Andrew's disappearance, He'd driven home down Opossum Road, and when he turned into the roadway, he saw a vehicle parked there, which was unusual at that time of night, especially seeing it was a telecom vehicle.
The forensic team found tyre marks on the spot that the witnesses had reported, and an impression of the tread was taken. Should detectives track down the car, they'd be able to place it at the scene.
We organised with Telecom to obtain all the records of telecom station wagons in the state of Victoria. We had to determine where each of those vehicles was, so there was a process of elimination conducted in regards to speaking to all the drivers of those vehicles and putting them into a particular area that night.
After searching the records of more than 3,000 telecom cars, police came up with one car that couldn't be accounted for the night Andrew Astbury went missing. But was the driver of the car an important witness, or potentially the young man's killer? Andrew Astbury's disappearance was now being treated as a homicide. A broken knife and a 300-metre trail of his blood ending at a driveway put it in no doubt. Witnesses had seen a car parked near to Andrew's house on the night he disappeared, and now police had tracked down its driver, Stephen Pavick.
The situation was that Stephen was the ex-boyfriend of Shannon, who was a current girlfriend of Andrew Astbury.
Andrew had become friends with Shannon while working as a courier at her flower shop. It was a platonic relationship at first, but that didn't stop Pavick's intense jealousy.
Stephen Pavick was very jealous of Shannon having a friend, being a male friend, being Andrew.
We had information from other people, friends, associates, that several times Stephen Pavick had made threats against Andrew Astbury.
He would be enraged and fight and argue with Shannon in relation to Shannon being very friendly with Andrew.
2 months before Andrew disappeared, Pavick's jealousy boiled over at the local pub.
When Stephen saw Astbury there, he started to work himself up into a bit of a frenzy.
She arranged to have him here, did you?
He then went over and spoke loudly with Astbury and threatened him, and then threw a beer over Andrew.
Hey! Stay away!
Which also landed on a female friend of Andrew's at the time. She returned the favour and threw her drink over Pavick, who then got even angrier, and a fight started to develop until the bouncers intervened. As Pavick was leaving the hotel and being evicted by the bouncer, he threatened to kill Andrew. Shannon advised us that there had been other occasions where Pavick had been insanely jealous of Andrew for no good reason, and he'd made threats there to, even on one occasion, to shoot him with a shotgun. She told him not to be so silly about it, but he just continued on with his insane jealousy that there was something going on between Shannon and Andrew, which there wasn't.
The night of the pub fight, Shannon ended her relationship with Pavick. A few weeks later, she started dating Andrew, but they kept the relationship quiet, fearing Pavick's reaction.
You often see it with a lot of young men. They become insanely jealous of their girlfriends not talking to other boys and that. It's childish and puerile, but obviously Pavick suffered from that along with a lot of young fellows. Just his demeanour across the board showed that at that stage he really hadn't grown up.
Pavick's jealousy was extreme, but was he a murderer? Police needed concrete evidence to link him directly to the crime, and they hoped it would be found in Pavick's car. The same car seen by witnesses on the night Andrew disappeared.
I noticed that the carpet in the rear of the wagon was a slightly different colour than the carpet in the rest of the car, and that made me think that maybe that had been replaced. We looked for blood traces within the vehicle, but nothing was found.
There was a potential that Andrew's body had been conveyed in the back of the car, and that's why the carpet was a different colour. We then knew that he'd purchased the carpet somewhere, so we started looking to where you could buy second-hand Commodore carpets.
At a wreckers not far from Pavick's work, the detectives found what they had suspected. A receipt that proved Pavick had bought the carpet the day after Andrew disappeared.
We decided then to place surveillance on Pavic, and that's physical surveillance as well as listening devices and telephone intercepts to determine what he was doing, what he was saying, who he was talking to, and what his movements were from there in case he went back to a crime scene to hide further evidence.
Someone out there must know something. I mean, he's the second of 4 children, so there's not going to be a Christmas for us this year.
Christmas Day was particularly difficult. We all sat around and opened our presents, and there was a pile in the corner that wasn't opened. So that was a pretty hard day.
The next day, police received a call.
Farmer Graham Cock was mustering sheep when he noticed the weighted-down body in the middle of the river.
I received a phone call late in the evening that a body had been found at Warrandyte, that it was handcuffed to some sort of piece of machinery, and I was told, look, we don't think it's your body. Something deep inside me told me it was Andrew. I just rang my crew straight away and said, get up to Warrandyte, I think it's our body.
The body was quite decomposed. It appeared to have been in the water well over the time that Andrew had been missing. So Mick Hughes' suspicions that it was the 24-year-old would be proved one way or the other at the post-mortem.
One of the recommended first steps in the forensic pathology investigation of a death like this is to X-ray the whole of the body, often from multiple angles. The reason for doing this is that you may gather information that helps with identification, but most importantly can assist with documenting injuries that might be obscured by decomposition. The X-ray examination in this case revealed the presence of a triangular metal object within the left upper chest. The object had sharp edges and looked like it was the tip of a knife.
I collected the blade from the body of the deceased, brought it back to the laboratory and did a physical fit on 2 pieces of knife blade, and I was quite certain that the 2 pieces had once been the 1 piece of knife blade.
About 3:30 in the morning, there was a knock on the door. Sorry. And the homicide squad were there and said, shall we put the kettle on?
Andrew Astbury was missing, presumed dead. For 10 days, family, police and volunteers had searched for him, and then his body appeared, floating in a river 20 kilometres from his home. He had been handcuffed to an engine part, and these were now the most vital pieces of evidence the police had to work with.
The piece of machinery had been imported into Australia and basically used on the Sugarloaf Dam project. There was no recent history on it, so the decision for me to go to the media was very easy. The only way we're going to find out is declare it to the public and say, hey, can you help us with the investigation?
Detectives today displayed the heavy turbine casing from a German-made generator used to weigh down the body of murder victim Andrew Astbury. The handcuffs are also unusual. They're considered expensive at around $100 a pair and can only be bought at select outlets. Police today revealed they're hunting at least 2 people.
We'll be pouring as many resources as we have into locating the perpetrator or indeed perpetrators of this crime.
I don't believe that anyone could lift a body that's handcuffed to that machine. It's just too heavy.
Even though Pavic had been spoken to by the Doncaster CIU, he'd never been formally approached and interviewed. And I thought we were at a time where he should be interviewed, given the opportunity to admit or deny the allegations.
I intend to interview you in relation to the death of Andrew John Astbury. You may communicate with or attempt to communicate with a legal practitioner. Do you understand these rights?
Yes, can I do that now then?
Yeah, just let me finish this.
Okay.
The next question was going to be, do you wish to exercise any of these rights before the interview proceeds?
Yes, I would.
Pavic spoke to his solicitor, and his answer to every question was the same.
On the 15th of December 1994,
Can you tell me your movements that day?
Got no comment.
Do you know a person by the name of Andrew Astbury?
Got no comment.
Do you know a person by the name of Shannon?
No comment.
Do you drive a Holden Commodore station wagon?
No comment.
You're employed at Telecom Australia?
No comment.
As a result of Pavic providing a no-comment interview, we're left with few options. We can either charge him, but we had insufficient evidence at that stage to support the case against him. So it's decided to release him, and we just continue on with our investigation. As I was showing Stephen out of the building, he's obviously very antagonistic towards myself and the others, and he made some comment about we'd never be able to get him. My reaction to that was as well, we'll see what comes about.
Stephen Pavic had set the detectives a challenge. Their next move was to link him to the handcuffs used on Andrew's body. So they conducted a systematic search of the stores near his home, and they struck gold. Pavic had bought a pair of handcuffs 1 month before the murder.
Pavic told the owner of the store that he wanted to purchase the handcuffs for a mate's Buxton. The handcuffs were very expensive handcuffs, they're over $100. The owner recalled saying to Pavic, "Why don't you buy a cheaper pair?" He said, "No, I want a very good pair because I used to have a pair and they fell apart."
Then there was a breakthrough on the engine part.
The next day, we received a phone call from a off-duty young policeman. He had a mate who had spoken with him and said that he knew where the motor part came from, that he'd seen it on a track up in Coldstream.
They thought they'd go up and have a look, and if the piece of machinery wasn't there, they'd know, well, it is the piece of machinery we were talking about.
They went up there the next day, couldn't find the motor part there, but found some yellow pieces that would have gone with the motor part, so they contacted us at Homicide.
In the search, they found a garbage bag secreted in a hollow log with some grass just thrown over the top of it to cover it.
The bag contained a number of clothing items, shirts, runners. It also contained 3 pairs of jeans. One pair of jeans we could positively identify as belonging to the deceased, Andrew Astbury.
One pair of jeans, there was a big blue S written in texture on the pocket. When that was shown to Shannon, she was able to identify the clothing as belonging to Stephen Pavic, because Pavic's mother always wrote in texture on her 2 sons' clothing to differentiate the 2 boys' clothing.
But the garbage bag also contained another pair of jeans.
Which led us to believe that there were only 2 possible scenarios that may have taken place. And one is 2 persons committed the crime, or 1 person committed the crime and another person helped dispose of the body. That was our thinking at the time.
It became essential to know who owned the other set of clothing.
After finding the jeans, we knew that the person we were looking for was quite short. Most of Pavic's friends were tall or large, and there was only 1 person these jeans could have fit who was an associate of Pavic's. We eventually arrested him and spoke to him at our office. We showed him the pair of jeans and he confirmed that they were his, but denied any involvement in the death of Andrew Astbury, and provided us with a plausible explanation as to how his jeans came to be in the bag with the deceased and Pavic's.
They'd been left in Pavic's car some weeks prior when they'd been down to the beach. Pavic had told this friend that the clothing had been lost and actually physically gave him $50 to replace that clothing.
We believe that after Pavic murdered Astbury, he then used this person's jeans to wipe the blood off the back section of the vehicle before he stuffed it in the bag with the rest of the clothes. The finding of the black garbage bag with the clothes inside it proved to be the evidence we required to put it beyond any shadow of a doubt that Stephen Pavic was the offender in this case.
Also in the bag, gloves and a pair of blood-stained runners, size 11.5, the same size that Stephen Pavic wore. The left tread was consistent with the footprint on the cardboard found next to the murder weapon. Police now had the hard evidence they needed to arrest Pavic.
I further put it to you that that's the reason why you went over to Andrew's place that night, because you saw his van in the driveway at your girlfriend's place. What do you say to that?
You're just putting words in my mouth.
I'm putting an allegation to you, and
no, it's not true.
Anyway,
it's not true.
All roads and evidence in regard to Andrew Astbury's murder were leading to one person, Stephen Pavick. Not only had he threatened Andrew 2 months before, but his bloodied shoes, jeans and gloves were found in a garbage bag near to where Andrew's body was found.
This morning, homicide detectives arrested a 24-year-old Eltham man at his work in Preston and are questioning him over the killing.
Do you know anything in relation to the disappearance and murder of Andrew Astbury?
Yes.
What can you tell me about it?
The night that Andrew disappeared, I just went past Shannon's house and saw Andrew's car parked out the front. Just went home.
And what have you done once you got home?
I just sat down on my bed for a while and just had a beer.
And while you're sitting there having a drink, what's happened then?
I was just started thinking about Andrew's car being at the front of Shannon's house. I wanted Shannon to be my girlfriend again, so I just wanted to find out like what was happening, if he was going out with her or anything. Just in case he was, I wanted to just like scare him a little bit. I didn't want to hurt him. That's just one thing I didn't want to do. I didn't want to hurt him. I didn't want to cause him any pain or anything like that. I just wanted to scare him a little bit and find out what's happening. So I went into the garage and grabbed a fishing knife, got in the car and drove to Warrandyte. Then I parked down this little road and just jogged up to Andrew's joint.
And I was sitting somewhere around here. We can't sort of remember exactly where, just somewhere around there. I went down there and had a piss.
Put on some my gym gloves just in case I got into an argument with Andrew or something, and if he punched me, so I could punch him back without hurting my hands.
Then Andrew's car just pulled up there.
Towards the stones there?
I think it was up there, I can't remember exactly where. And so I just walked up there behind it. I was just kneeling down behind it because I didn't want him to see me, I wanted to surprise him.
I heard his car door open and walked up next to him and just said, "I want to talk to you."
I grabbed him in a headlock and started walking down here. And I pulled out my knife, just sort of shoved it in his face, saying what was happening. Walked over to here, and then the next thing I knew, I fell down there, and like we both ended up sort of over there.
We just rolled around in the grass, sort of wrestling him a bit. And the next thing I knew, I just stabbed him. And the handle just broke off. I don't know if it was because it rolled on top of it or something. And he just yelled, and I just didn't know what to do. There was blood everywhere. I was just saying sorry, put my hand over his mouth to stop him yelling, because he was just yelling, and I just said sorry and just ran away. When I went back, it was just wasn't making a noise. So I just grabbed him and carried him down the end of the road.
How were you carrying him at this stage?
I think it was sort of like, if you want me to show you, I think it was just sort of like that.
In all the reenactments I've done, yes, offenders will intimate how they've done a particular action and that, not physically involve me in the process.
Like that.
And to be picked up and so easily by a powerful man, that was a little bit daunting in some regards. That path that he took was up and down dale, it was through the bush and underneath trees and that. It would have taken a lot of physical power and exertion to carry a body that far. He was a very powerful man.
I kept dragging him along until I got up to the top. It took a pretty long time. And then I quickly rang back and got the car.
Pavik's car was parked just down from the driveway. The place, witnesses had seen it on that fatal night.
And then I just went up there and grabbed him and just dragged him and chucked him in the back of the car.
Pavik then drove Andrew's body to bushland, 20 kilometres away.
I took his clothes off because they were all covered in blood.
And I had a garbage bag in the car just with some clothes from a friend of mine. We went down to the beach on the weekend and I had his clothes in and a few towels and stuff. So I just chucked them in there.
Just put it in that log, that burnt log down there.
Can you just walk in to the close police and point it to?
Just in there. Yep. And then when I was walking up, I saw that big yellow thing.
Pavik handcuffed Andrew to the engine part and then dumped him in the river.
Pavik cried at one stage of the interview. I think it's more a case of he was crying because of the pressure on him and that he'd been caught. I don't think there was much remorse about that he killed Andrew, just a case of that he'd been caught.
I just want everyone to know that I just didn't plan this to happen. It just happened like that. It's something unfortunate. This was the last thing in the world that I wanted to happen.
So Stephen Pavik had admitted to killing Andrew Astbury, yet he was trying to establish a case for manslaughter. However, detectives had evidence it was a premeditated, brutal murder.
We knew a lot of what he was telling us was rubbish. So from our point of view, he was putting on a good show.
Homicide Squad detectives led Stephen Francis Pavik into the City Watch House late last night after a day of questioning.
24-year-old Stephen Pavik had been charged with the murder of Andrew Astbury. He had told police that he was there the night Andrew died, but Andrew's death was an accident.
I just want everyone to know that I just didn't plan this to happen. It just happened like that. It's something unfortunate. This was the last thing in the world.
Throughout his interview and walk around with the police, he reiterated this a number of times.
Like, I didn't mean to hurt him down there. Look, I didn't want any of this to happen, and it's just sort of happened. I just want to say that, like, I didn't want this to happen, and I feel terrible about it all.
We knew exactly what had taken place, and we knew that he was setting up a manslaughter defence. We knew a lot of what he was telling us was rubbish.
And it's totally self-serving. It's to try and convince a judge and jury that it was a spontaneous action that resulted in Andrew's death, and it wasn't. It was a premeditated murder.
So from our point of view, he was putting on a good show.
Why did you take the knife with you from home to Andrew's house?
To try and scare Andrew.
I put it to you that you intended to take the knife with you to kill Andrew. What do you say?
No way. No way. There's no way I would have done that.
He rolled on top of me and I rolled on top of him, and the handle was just busted off. And
do you know where the handle was?
No, it's somewhere down there, I'd say. I don't know.
I think
exactly
Pavik, like a lot of good liars, put in 90% truth and 10% fiction. The bits about it being an accident, I think, was fiction.
I thought it was nonsense. I was at the post-mortem and I saw the blade being removed from Andrew's body, and nothing would convince me that he was stabbed accidentally in a struggle.
And it was proved fact by the forensic pathologist.
A considerable degree of force would need to be applied to the knife to cause the tip to snap off. It appeared that the knife was inserted above the left collarbone and headed almost vertically downwards through the subclavian artery, causing damage to the collarbone and the first rib and entering the upper part of the left chest. Because of the number of injuries to bone seen in this case, the knife was either inserted multiple times through the same injury, or that with a single insertion, the knife was moved around while it was inserted in the body. These features are not consistent with accidental injury and are most consistent with intentional injury.
Pavic was just far superior in size and strength, and if Pavic had grabbed him, he wouldn't have had a chance of escaping or fighting back for that matter.
And there was further damning evidence. Police had in their hands proof that this was not the accident that Pavic claimed.
We became aware of a conversation with Pavic where Pavic indicated that his intention was to kill Andrew and that he believed that he'd probably get away with a manslaughter.
I've spoken to a solicitor, right? Yeah, and when it comes to the crunch, I'm going to spew my guts and tell him what happened. I stabbed the... probably get away with manslaughter. I just have to make sure that, like, no one knew it was premeditated.
In that same conversation, we had pretty damning admissions that he'd had premeditation, that he'd laid in wait for Andrew on at least one other occasion, and Andrew hadn't come home.
If we don't find evidence in these cases to prove premeditation or an intent to kill, and the story goes before a jury where you have the lovesick fellow who lost his girlfriend and goes to sort it out with a new boyfriend, then most occasions they will get off with a manslaughter. So for us, it was very important that we had those admissions of premeditation.
It was clear by now that Stephen Pavic had murdered Andrew Astbury in cold blood. If there was any doubt as to how callous he'd been, his refusal to say how he dumped the body was a clear sign of his guilt.
Just down there and across through there, then down and then just down to the river.
Oh, do you want to come down with us?
Look, I don't know, this is sort of dragging on a bit. You sort of know everything now, don't you?
Well, we just want to see which way you've come down here, Steve.
No, I don't want to say anything else, sorry.
Sorry?
No, I'm not saying anything else about this. Like, there's a massive hill there, it's just... Sorry.
When we stopped the tape and asked him why he didn't want to continue at that stage, he said that he'd thrown the body over a cliff and the jury would convict him without a worry in the world if they knew of those things, so he didn't want to continue at that stage. The way he treated the body was disrespectful. I mean, you know, he stripped the body down, he threw away jewellery and items of identification. He's dragged the body through the bush, he's thrown it over cliffs, he's weighted it down, thrown it into the river. He had no concern about what he was doing to Andrew's body. He just wanted to do what he had to do to get rid of the body.
Andrew Astbury's family and friends walked from the Supreme Court relieved at the guilty verdict, but still reeling from his brutal slaying.
At Andrew's funeral, the celebrant said, "Let justice prevail." And, it's good to see it does.
There was a big sense of relief when they reached a guilty verdict. It really helped to have confirmed what we felt, that there was no way that this wasn't planned.
Well, the murder conviction was important to me, and I've got to be honest, it gave us a great deal of satisfaction from the point of view of we're a bit of a silent witness, I guess, for Andrew too, is Andrew's the only other person that knows the true version of events, and he can't speak out, he's dead. So our role is really his representative. So from my point of view, for the Astbury family, for Shannon, for Andrew himself, it was very, very important, and it was very satisfying to take it from a manslaughter to a murder.
Jilted lover Stephen Francis Pavic has been sentenced to a minimum 13 years jail for murdering a man who'd begun dating his ex-girlfriend.
I can never forgive Pavic. I would lock the door and throw the key away. I don't think he should be allowed back into society. I mean, he'll be, if he gets out for good behaviour, he'll be 38 when he's released.
That will be in 2008.
My opinion of Pavic? Pavic's a coward and a bully. He's a cowardly assassin who lay in wait for a smaller, weaker man. They're not the actions of a true man.